Hi Mujeeb bhai.
Hi.
Welcome back
Welcome back to where?
to Sudeep Audio's channel. A lot of people have given a feedback, that your tips were very handy. That don't become a tiki champ is your takya ka naam. सब साले हैं ही पर tiki champ मत बनो. Just try and be a good people person is what you highlighted on last time. And also patience is the key for any sound engineer. So taking on to patience as a topic, when you work in a live sound scenario, you've been doing shows with Ustad Zakir Hussain, Niladri Kumar, and so many such artists for years. So if you could talk about what are the challenges that one faces in the live sound arena or business as a sound engineer.
There's a huge difference between the stresses in the recording studio and dealing with sound reinforcement. The big thing would be in the recording studio, you tend to look at everything with a large magnifying glass because this is going to be history. Like if you have a mistake or something that isn't perfect, you're going to have to listen to it forever and regret that you didn't fix it at that point in time. In the sound reinforcement side of the business, this is not the way to do it because you'll never get anything done if you start focusing on all the low-level details. A sound reinforcement live sound job, the situation is in the moment. What is happening now, and it is never going to happen like this again. As a result of which, it should be as good as you can get it without really having to look at every tiny little thing, in great detail. However, you do have to deliver, and you have to deliver, like I said, in the moment, and which means that it's a different kind of stress. And there's a lot of people that can, sort of straddle both sides of the fence with equal ease, but it does require a different mindset. So, at some point, although the equipment is very similar and, the theory of all of it is very similar, the mental makeup there's a switch. You have to sort of deal with it a little differently. Yeah, I'm sure that some people enjoy one more than the other and therefore they would show a preference. I really enjoy both, so it really makes, to me there's no difference as in is this better or is that better. It's just different.
Right. So if you could run us through, because we've not covered this topic earlier with somebody else, as to how does this whole thing begin? When you are a freelance sound engineer, how does this whole right from inquiry to execution?
Right.
What are the steps involved and how are you kind of involved in that process?
Okay, so let's say for the sake of argument, at some point I am contacted by a concert promoter who says that, we've planned a concert on such and such date.
And city.
And will you mix this concert for us? So once it's clear that that date is in fact available and I can get along with that promoter and therefore I agree, the next step for me would be what is the venue, what are the details of the venue, who are the artists involved. Now if I already know the artists, I may know what stuff they're going to need. If I don't, I'm going to have to find out. So once I have all that data, I would create a technical rider.
So you have to talk to the artist?
Yes, absolutely. Unless, of course, I've already worked with them, then I know vaguely what is required. Details we will get along the way. The technical rider involves the actual stage layout of how those artists are going to be placed on stage, because that is very important both in terms of sound and in terms of eye contact.
But who tells you all these details?
Well, I would actually put together 3 or 4 alternate layouts and then discuss with the artists to see which one is most acceptable.
Because there are many shows in which there is a theme of Independence Day, तो किसी को ऊपर बिठाया, किसी को नीचे.
I'm saying if the quote mark production design has thoughts of their own, this would be the correct time to discuss those. Because many times production designers have, fantastic ideas visually, which may not work acoustically. For instance, by accident it may turn out that their set design involves placing a loud acoustic instrument right next to a soft acoustic instrument. Now this is going to cause trouble from the sound aspect. So it means that if this is what they want to do, we have to worry about how to create a baffle between them. Then that baffle should not be, visually obnoxious. So all those things matter and they should be discussed before any of this is finalized. Right. If it's just a straight up music concert, obviously these constraints don't apply. then I would create a layout that works from the sound perspective, maybe a couple of choices which will then be decided upon in final by the artist, that this layout works for us and we'll go with this. Then I would set up whatever technical requirements are there, what kind of microphones, what kind of stands, what kind of console, depending on the venue, what kind of PA system possibly. If the artist has preferences, now many of them are endorsees of certain products, then you have to try very hard to get those products that they're endorsees of, so that they are not caught in public using somebody else's products. Which, it happens from time to time. You don't always get what you want, but this is where eventually these technical documents will go to the promoter. He'll presumably talk to a stage and lighting and sound contractor, whoever the vendor is in that city, to provide those. Now, if there are any conflicts or substitutions, I would really like to be able to speak to the vendors or contractors directly, so that I know in advance that, okay, this is not available, it's being replaced by this. So it's not like you can't work with a console other than what you've asked for. So if I have a preference, I'll express it. But if I don't always get that preference, I have no issues working with something else, provided the quality levels are more or less the same.
But doesn't it throw you back that you ask for an XYZ brand of a console, and when you go there, you realize that either the inputs are less, or the brand is different, or the model number is different?
See, I would be fussy about the number of inputs that are required and, basically the detailed hardware requirements. But I may not be so fussy about the brands, because I know I can work with them, possibly with a little help from whoever the local systems technician or engineer who is available there with the vendor is. He can walk me through, and it's not really that difficult, because ultimately at the bottom, the basis is all the same. I agree that there may be some inconveniences, as in I am familiar with this console, so I would prefer this one. But if I don't get this model, it doesn't mean I'm not going to work with something else.
And when do you come to know these things, that the equipment is as per your requirement?
I would hope sometime before the day of the show.
The day of the show, obviously.
Sometimes that happens. Okay. I would like to know in advance. At least I'm mentally prepared that, okay, maybe I'm going to need a little more time, and therefore I'm not rushed actually at the time of sound check.
But does this happen, or has this ever happened that, sir, you asked for this, for example, an SM58, but वो था नहीं, बिगड़ गया, तो हम लोग भी ये फलाना लेके आए?
It happens.
Last minute also.
It may happen at the last minute. Now,
बारिश हो गया, वो गोडाउन में प्रॉब्लम हो गया.
So we got something else. Yeah. It has happened, either it's workable or not, and I don't know. My analysis would be with whatever difficult circumstances, say that, like some emergency situation and this is not available. Can the show go on with whatever it is that we in fact have available or not? If not, I would reserve the right to call off the show. In fact, this is one of the criteria that I impose on anybody that I work with, that I have the right to call off the show if I don't like,
the artist is boss, mera to paisa gaya phir.
So I'm saying that's a risk that they have to take. Otherwise, I'm not doing her job.
But does that also happen that the artist also throws some tantrums? You are okay with it, but the artist says, boss, I cannot work with this.
Yeah, it has happened. And it may be a question of my ability to explain to the artist that we can work with this. And okay, I'm sorry you're upset, but we can in fact continue with this. So after that, if the artist says, no, I'm not doing the concert, then absolutely that is his call.
But then at such times, how do you handle, because again, it's coming down to the same thing that you said earlier about people management.
Yeah, of course.
So it's all working with people, but here there are many people, many different departments.
See, I learnt a long time back not to lose my temper, or at least to try very hard not to lose my temper, because losing your temper only increases your own blood pressure. It doesn't do anything to the situation. If it is terrible, it is going to remain terrible. Now the thing is, if you lose your temper, it's going to only make things worse. So, how can we sort of fix the problem, or at least work around it? Certainly not by losing your temper. So I try very hard, not to do that.
In a recent interview, Jukubai said that he and you worked on creating weird sounds using a synth.
It was a long time back.
Yes. So now, do those kind of creative ideas come to you on stage also? In terms of...
See, the thing is, if you have the time and the liberty to try new experiments, by all means I would do them. Means you must have a cooperative artist, and you must have a suitable situation. Let's say you need an hour for sound check, but you have 4 hours. I wouldn't mind experimenting. In fact, I do remember that one particular concert we had finished sound checking everything the previous day.
Okay.
That means the day of the concert, everything was set up, but nobody was really interested in doing a sound check again. So, I mean, I offered all the artists that if they want to do a comfort check and maybe come and, just sit around, play a piece or something. As it turns out, it wasn't deemed necessary. But Rakesh said, okay, let's just go full around. Now, because we had nothing else to do and everything is 100% set up, confirmed, sound checked and all, we decided that we would try every microphone in that vendor's collection on Rakesh's flute with nothing else being changed.
Okay.
So, open your locker and take out whatever microphones are available and let's just rotate them one at a time and, play the same piece through the same EQ, through the same processing and just see what it sounds like. So there was no reason to do it. But we discovered that a specific microphone had the best natural sound for Rakesh's flute. And it wasn't a particularly expensive microphone. Rakesh decided that, I'll buy one of these. And eventually he did. And then he took it on tour for some shows that he had. And then he came back and cursed me.
Oops.
Saying, आपने क्या मेरे को माइक्रोफोन खरीदवाया? मुझे ऐसा लगता है ये माइक्रोफोन के साथ में मुझे भाई भी चाहिए. I said, I'm sorry, I can't do anything about that.
So this kind of thing does happen.
I mean, techniques evolve because of experiment, because somebody did something and the results turned out to be good, and then other people learned from that. So the point over here is, if you have the time and the opportunity, by all means experiment. And if the results turn out to be good, remember how you did that. And if the results turn out to be bad, remember how you did that so that you don't do it again.
So when you're on the desk or the console, in live sound, FOH as they call it, it's okay to doze off once in a while, or you have to be attentive for all 2 hours, 2.5 hours?
I would say that I cannot allow my attention to wander for a second, because you don't know what is going to happen in that 1 second. And as expected, it's always your fault. So you can never hide behind the excuse that, I fell asleep or I was looking somewhere else. Because why were you looking somewhere else? Why are you listening to something else? Attention should be focused on the stage the whole time. This, in fact, again is one of those stresses that is different from the studio to live. In the studio, you may have 10 other things that also have to be dealt with at the same time. So you're not always looking at the artist through the glass. But dealing with live sound, you always have to be looking at what is happening on stage. In fact, this is a common issue with certain kinds of concerts. People don't seem to realize the importance of having the house desk in the audience. And there will often be circumstances, due to aesthetics or even politics, that the console is not placed in the appropriate location. See, people don't seem to realize that the house interest is paramount. What the audience hears and how they react to that is the most important thing for, the delivery of good sound to a live audience. Therefore, the house engineer and his desk obviously have to be located in the audience. They cannot be located to the side somewhere or at the back somewhere and so on. There's no way that they can function that way. That's basically what sometimes the situation is this, that you run into a circumstance where the desk is kept to the side. Can you not work from there? No, I'm sorry, we can't work from there.
But you do have 2 setups, right? Like you have a mix
Depends
and an FOH.
Depends on the size of the concert. You have a FOH desk and you have a monitor desk if it's a large enough concert to justify the use of a separate monitor desk and engineer.
Right. That's more for the stage artists.
Like many artists, many microphones, many monitors, then it becomes very hard for the FOH engineer to judge what is happening on stage, and then it makes sense to incur the additional cost and effort, to set up an independent monitor desk and engineer.
In many shows, you would be, that at least you handle, there will be a lot of encore and things like that,
Yeah.
So or maybe the audience is really starting to jump and dance and stuff. So at that time, the artist also gets really energized and starts playing louder.
Yeah.
So how do you monitor those things and be careful that, these levels are balanced?
Well, you have to keep a track of, what levels is distortion happening on your outputs and adjust things accordingly. This is true. In fact, artists typically will perform louder than they do at sound check. And we're aware of this from the beginning. So quite honestly, one of the things that I routinely do is to run the sound check much louder than would be normal for that performance. So that if any untoward things are going to happen, I know them, I've identified those in advance. So I usually run sound check 6 dB louder than I actually run the show.
Right, so that's a good tip.
Which means when the show is being run at 6 dB, I have 6 dB worth of headroom, worth of liberty, to allow them to play louder without causing, untoward effects.
Okay. In many shows, we see the artists giving signals to the engineer.
Yeah.
Do you have those codes worked out at lunch, or how does that?
No, it's like over time, some people have certain signs, and you will eventually learn to recognize them if you learn to, work with the artist long enough. I would say that the amount of codes being transmitted like this from stage to the engineer would not be necessary if the FOH engineer is not doing monitors. Most of these changes and instructions have to do with the way the artist is hearing things on stage, and therefore these, the sign language has to do with changes or corrections that they want to the monitor mixes. Now, if the monitor engineer is different, and there is in fact a separate monitor desk and engineer, then you're not going to maybe even see these signs because they're to the side.
Okay.
So it's clear that if you can see signs being made to the house engineer, one of the things you should learn from that is that the house engineer is also managing monitors.
Okay. But that does happen in
of course.
shows. So Mujeeb bhai, when we have these kind of communications, does that make you upset that the artist is like many times making a face and saying,
No, why not? Why should it?
So it doesn't kind of affect your ego or something that I did a good job and he's not doing it, or he moved the mic?
See, now the artist's perception of what is happening on stage is a combination of what he's hearing from his monitors and whatever reflected stuff is coming back to him from the sound in the house. So he's probably hearing it very differently. And what you think is fantastic may not sound like that to him over there. But once again, the only real way of getting better results would be a change in the setup in the monitors, which is one of the reasons why it's very hard for the FOH engineer to judge what is happening on stage and therefore what corrections need to be made. And then this sign language begins to get more involved. So, I would strongly recommend for every conceivable concert, you should have a separate monitor desk and engineer, because he's on stage, he's closest to the artist and he's in the best position to judge what corrections or what improvements need to be made for the artist's monitoring on stage.
So many times these sound vendors, when they kind of rig the speakers up, the subs and the main boxes, do you have to be present then?
No. Typically, the sound vendors will have a systems engineer who sets all this up. And as an operating engineer, my expectations would be when I arrive there for the sound check, all of this has already been done correctly. Now, if I have some personal preferences about the way the system sounds, I may make those adjustments when I arrive. But I expect it to be running properly and tuned more or less flat before we get there. Of course, it happens often that the systems people are busy or they're late, and then I may need to do some systems myself, which I guess you have to be prepared for.
You've done shows, a lot of them in US, Europe, and other parts of the world. How has your experience been in terms of dealing with this whole process there versus in India?
Not very different. I would in fact think that in India we tend to be a lot more easygoing about a great many things than they are in the West. As in, we don't have quite so many union rules or interaction between groups of people working.
Is higher here? Or?
No, is the resistance to getting somebody to do something that is not strictly part of his domain is much higher in the West than it is here. Exactly. So, we tend to be very easygoing and very relaxed about all of this, and you can maybe slowly, but you can get things done. Over there, it's like if you expect like an electrical issue to be resolved, the electrical crew is different and nobody else will help you with that.
Or you don't
And
touch.
let's say if they've gone for lunch, there's nothing you can do until they come back from lunch.
We cannot.
No. So that's, it's a big difference.
Okay.
Other than that, I'm saying everything is more or less the same.
But the chaos in the management.
Well, you can have chaos in situations over there as well. I mean, ultimately it's dependent on what sort of infrastructure is available at that specific venue, no matter which city in the world it is. So, I mean, it's possible to have places with very good infrastructure and a non-cooperative attitude. And it's possible to have very cooperative people and terrible infrastructure. So, they're very different cases, but in both cases you have to bear the brunt of how can I get work done in these circumstances.
So Mujeeb bhai, when you're saying that, it's basically nothing to do with West or India or something, it's the situation.
No, I mean, it's not like some company makes a special model of this equipment to sell to India. It's the same piece of equipment.
Correct. But we have audiences saying, बहुत बाहर मत सुनाई देता है ये सब कॉन्सर्ट इंडिया का साउंड एकदम ऐसा ही है.
नहीं, गलत है.
वो पब्लिक मतलब या तो
गलत
biased है.
गलत है. See, it may be that perception has been encouraged because for a great many years we did not have good enough infrastructure. I don't think that is true any longer.
That's true.
Once upon a long time back, it was like, import duties were high, licenses were hard to get, and as a result of which we had to deal with equipment that either wasn't appropriate for what you were trying to do or just of really low quality. And we've dealt with that for a great many years, and pretty much, I would be happy to say that we've extracted the best that we could from the worst possible circumstances. Maybe that allows us to cope better with better circumstances.
There are a lot of sound engineers who are studio engineers, and given the market economy these days, there's more money in live than in studio because musicians are becoming engineers themselves. Many of them are. So many studio engineers are saying they want to be live sound engineers, but are not sure how to do the transition, or how are there any other skills that they need to know. So any suggestions or?
Well, I guess you have to do it and, sort of.
No, who will give you a chance?
This is also true. Ultimately, somebody has to have some confidence in your abilities for you to get hired. So, maybe work with a new band that, is open to things. And if it turns out that you're effective and useful, you will certainly learn what the differences are, between working in a sort of closed, controlled environment like a studio and, throwing yourself off a cliff, which is what live sound looks like to people that move from studio.
So, like you had also said, and many others have, that assisting somebody in the studio was a good way of learning on the job. For live sound also, is that
Yes, but the amount of hands-on that you will get is very restricted because of the nature of the job. As a result of which, is probably a good idea to sort of apprentice yourself to, somebody who's already working. But until you're in a situation where you can do something yourself, you're never really going to learn, how it's done.
when there are credits given after the show, or sometimes between the show or during the show, the chief band leader or the singer or somebody does introduce all musicians on stage.
Right.
Do they also introduce you or the FOH?
Yeah.
Do they all the time, or?
I would expect them to do it all the time.
Okay.
Suppose it doesn't happen, it's not like I'm going to be upset.
Right. Because in one of such kind of talks, Shandun Ublikar mentioned that it's alright if the sound engineer doesn't get mentioned because he's not a part of the band. Do you agree with that? That the
No.
sound engineer is not a part of the band?
No.
I mean, he didn't mean it that way completely, but saying that acknowledgements, if you want to be there to be famous, don't be there, be on stage.
Yeah, so I agree with his point of view to the extent that I'm not there to be acknowledged. I'm there to deliver something.
Correct.
And as long as I feel that I have achieved, whatever I started out to do, I'm happy. So it's not like having the acknowledgement makes me a different person or a happier person or anything like that.
But it does help to get acknowledged.
However, recognition is a good thing one way or the other, and the artist acknowledging your presence means that you have done something that is in their interest, and therefore you should be happy about it.
Right.
So let's put it another way. I'm happy if I'm acknowledged, but I'm not unhappy if I'm not.
Okay.
I don't know if that makes sense, but that's probably the best way I can put it.
Right. But you don't believe in this that a band should mention the sound engineer's name on invites, tickets, because you are also a part of the band in a way, if you see.
Yes, but I'm not the one that is causing the ticket to sell. Nobody ever came to a concert because he knew that the sound engineer is going to give him good sound.
I mean, that's because it's never happened, no, till now.
No, even if it does happen, even if sound engineers do get credit on invites or tickets or so on, I'm saying that's not a selling point. And ultimately, the reason somebody buys the ticket is the artist, not the engineer, not the venue, not the quality of equipment being used, and in all of that.
Right.
So it makes no difference, shall we say.
Okay. So does a sound engineer get to hang out with the band when you are traveling? Or
Yeah, of course.
It's like just a crew member kind of a thing. There's no discrimination.
No,
that
not at all.
happens.
Not at all. At least I've never seen it.
Right. Any other pointers that you'd like to give to people in terms of travel, stay, nights, etc., that will make them be successful as a live sound engineer?
I would say if you have any habits that are time scheduled, as in if you lead any part of your life by a timetable, throw it out of the window. Because there are no, this I need to sleep at this time and I need my coffee at this time and I have to have lunch at this time. That is not going to work. So that's one of those things that you have to sort of adjust your lifestyle so that it is not in any way being run by a timetable. Because let's say when you are on tour, the tour timetable is your timetable and it may not coincide with things that you have sort of conditioned yourself to, I have to wake up every morning at 8 o'clock and I have to have my tea and toast at 8:30. That's not going to happen.
वो घर पे करो.
You can do that at home, and in fact I would highly recommend that even at home you don't do it at the same time every day.
So Mujeeb, on that note, we'll wrap up part 2 of our conversation.
Very good, thank you.
And thank you for giving your time
Of course, anytime.
to our viewers. Thanks.
Enjoy.
Must.
तेरे को कुछ काट छाट करना पड़ेगा. I think there are some slack portions.